Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And that term, if you heard me mention it before, spiritual adventure, allows me to push the envelope about what I can discuss on the air and what topics that are intriguing to me, because I think it's important to be able to broaden our knowledge of metaphysics and alternate kinds of therapies in order to make our lives as rich as possible. And my guest who will be on in a few minutes is going to be doing that. She's a transformational expert, and I'm going to introduce her in a few minutes. Before I do, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon, and then you'll find a couple of paragraphs of sort of observations of what's happening within the cosmos. And then, of course, then it gets more personal as I break it down into the individual signs below there. And I encourage you to sign up there. You can get to that from my websites, chrisflisher.com or turningofthewheel.com. And if you want to chip in at any point in time, feel free to contribute to me through my Patreon account, which is at www.patreon.com. Just look up my name there, you'll see it. So, my next guest is Wendy Yellen. She's a clinical social worker, and she is working in the transformational practice, an ancient practice called Eidetics. And she's going to be coming on today to discuss this process and what it is. And her website is myspiritualmanifesto.com, one long string of words. And I encourage you to look her up. It's an ancient practice, and we're going to be discussing that process right now and how it comes about and how it's useful in helping us evolve to become our greater selves. So, without any further reduction, welcome to the show, Wendy. It's great to have you on today. I'm curious to hear about your process.
Thank you so much, Chris. And as you know, we're going to have an experience of the eidetic work during this podcast. So I want to encourage your listeners to fasten your seatbelts because I'm going to be working with Chris and with all of you as much as I possibly can, given that we can't talk.
Right.
I'm going to show you what's going on in your psyche in a way that should be an eye-opener no matter how much personal work you've done. And that's a big order, I know, but that's been my experience.
That is fascinating. Now, can you give us sort of the background of what the eidetic philosophy is and the process? Can you give us sort of that background?
Yes. So at this point in our Western history, most people think that they have to use their conscious mind or a behavioral change to change, to transform. It's really popular, behavioral therapies, cognitive therapies. And it's so curious because at the same time, people are really into the spiritual realm. Mm-hmm. They're really into their other than conscious mind. They're really into connection with spirit. And people spend time, money, and energy honing that ability to connect. Well, you don't do that behaviorally and you don't do it cognitively. Those parts of the mind aren't connected to the spiritual realm. It's a very different realm. So when it came time to change, let's go back just for a second to the ancient Greeks. The word eidetics comes from the word eidos, and one of the meanings of that word, one of the ways that it was used for the ancient Greeks, had to do with it being a gift from the gods. They didn't use it as a therapy, but they really understood the power of the healing power of the images, these eidetic images, which are different than visualization. So eidetics uses the mind in a very different order than we usually use it, and a very different openness without trying to control the mind. It's not about history, it's not about regurgitating memory, and it's not about that constricted way that the overly rational mind tries to jam us into a space that we don't fit. If that does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. You're looking for purity, you're looking for authenticity, sounds like.
an authenticity that's already there, but for all of us has been covered over by the crust of our history. So how do we get it back? And the one of the beauties of this work is that it's already there. It's just how to get to it. So this work connects you directly to it, not in a metaphor, not in telling you, okay, now I have to go with the flow and learn how to love myself. It's not that. It actually creates the shift because of the way it uses the mind. And again, we'll get a tiny bit of experience with that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It sounds so it's not and the purpose of it is to sort of realign your perception of your life in general, and how you can perhaps go forward using this therapy as a new baseline for moving forward in your life. So it enriches your experience and brings you closer to your spiritual core. Is that an accurate way of putting it?
I would say that what most of my private clients, a phrase that has come up spontaneously with my private clients and my mastermind clients, they say they just find themselves acting differently and feeling differently. So, for example, they feel themselves coming to life, or they feel relief in their life, or they feel a confidence that they didn't feel, or a quality of commitment to what's important to them, and then they do it, but they just find themselves doing it. So it's kind of skips a step it takes us right there. Mm-hmm. Takes us right to those places.
So you get to the core of the personality. That's what I was referring to when I said authenticity. It's sort of a sense of organic honesty, I guess, is what it is when it comes to the individual and what you're trying to achieve. And it is it a gentle process? Is it something that's startling? Is it revealing to people?
It's all of those.
All those.
So I'll tell you a quick story. So when I first started doing this work for myself, when I was experiencing it as a client, I had done lots and lots of therapies. I'm a social worker. I'd been in therapies for years, different therapies, and I was stunned at what came up from inside me. I thought to myself, how could I have been doing deep work all these years, and really good work that had helped me shift, and not realize how I was stopping myself in these particular ways? It really took my breath away. So it can be stunning, and it can also be super, super gentle and kind and loving, and like a whispering invitation to the larger self to come through. It's all those things and everything in between, because
and
it's
liberating in some ways.
It's very, yes, of course, because we're not unliberated. It's more, as I said before, the crust of history that starts to pile up on top of our naturally liberated self that, once we start growing up, we lose connection to that place so quickly, socially and educationally and religiously, and from our families. Like everything's conspiring to squeeze us into a box that is smaller than we are.
Interesting. So these are all of these outside stimuli that we're so used to being part of our lives, whether it be to the church, the school, the education system. All of these things add a layer which in some way suppresses all of that initial inner self, which really is begging to come out. Was this known? Do you think that people understand this at a very young level, and then it sort of gets forgotten? This is something that they would have known when they were younger, and then because of all those things that get plastered on top of them, they forget?
I love it. I think we live it. We may not know it because I don't think it's at all intellectual, but we live it when we're young. Have you ever followed, I remember years ago, I was following it. I was walking, and there was a child and her mother, walking besides me, and we were just on a sidewalk with trees, next to the concrete. Mm-hmm. And this child, little girl, every tiny bit of worm or tiny little piece of grass or dead leaf and the bark, everything was fascinating to her. She was in a world of delight, whereas what I saw was concrete and a tree growing out of concrete. I mean, that's simplified, but that was natural to her. Yeah. And then, of course, it gets... We don't tend to be supported in living that way, and culture certainly doesn't help us.
No, we are ridiculously distracted, and I think it's the innocence of the child that allows that pureness to come through. I've witnessed it in my own grandchild. He was just fascinated looking at the grass the other day, just sitting there, and he was in the backyard just looking at the grass and the ants, and he was totally drawn in. I couldn't understand what he was looking at. I was like, it's just grass, but he was fascinated by it. So that's the sort of the sort of what you're trying to return to, is that sense of wonder, that sense of awe about where we are, and being mindful of where we are, to the point where we take a greater appreciation of these simple things.
Absolutely. If you think of the neuronal pathways, we have the pathways. It's just they're totally covered up with thorns and brambles and dirt, but they're still there. So by the way that we use the mind with eidetics, it reopens those pathways. That's why it feels so natural to my private clients. They just feel like, oh my goodness, really, was I complaining about that last week? Because I just feel normal now. And that they feel normal because that is their norm. It's just that it's been so long.
And these are characteristics and traits that we are born with, and we have this natural inclination towards, but we get clogged up with all this extraneous chatter that just blows us away and distracts us from our real purpose. I think the distraction factor is huge, and I think that this type of therapy sort of tries to cut through that distraction and get us back to a place of purity and more authentic into our personal selves.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. So what happens when you come to a friend and they say, well-meaningly, you're in some distress, and then you come to a friend, you tell them what's going on, and with in all good meaning and from the heart, they say, well, everything's happening for a reason. And like a part of you wants to like smash their face in, because it's such a head-driven cognitive response to pain.
It's kind of a cop-out too. It's not really facing it,
I agree. It may be true, but it's not a response to the person, right? So we have all these, you were talking about distractions coming in and about the being so busy. So what often happens is people are wanting to make a shift, and then they let me see if I can come up with an example. A woman that was having trouble, one of my private clients, mastermind clients, she was an artist, an award-winning artist, but she couldn't get herself to actually get paid money for her art. It all was volunteer. So she was phenomenal, but she didn't want to risk all the things that would happen by having to ask for money and get hired in different ways and put herself out there and so many things, and call herself an artist. After all, she wasn't an artist if she was just doing it as a volunteer and so on. So she kept thinking to herself, I'll just try to make myself go to a job, any job, or particularly, let's say, in art. And she couldn't. So we have this thing going on in our head. I'm just going to make myself. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put it down at 9:15 on my calendar. I'm going to do it. And most of us just ignore that stuff. The mind generally doesn't do that for us. That part of the mind is not its job description. It's not set up to do that. And then we feel disappointed. There's something wrong with me. How come I'm still not doing what I say I want to do? Well, for my mind, what's happening inside in our deeper consciousness is stopping us. And all the effort in the world, if it's not working, it's because we're not dealing with the way we're destroying what matters most to us.
So, in the example,
we do that all the time.
In the example you used of the artist, she was reluctant to put herself out there, and as a result, she may have sold herself short because she couldn't make that leap between, actually charging for it. So she didn't, even though she knew she was an artist and that's what she was passionate about, she didn't have the confidence to sort of step out there and make herself become that person, because you kind of have to blow your own horn to do that, right? Isn't that part of it? You have to be very confident and sure of what you're doing and yourself.
Yes, and let's look at the subtlety. I don't want to go into the details because I don't want to do anything revealing for her, but she was already doing this art as a volunteer and winning awards. She was out there. Her name was out there. Mm-hmm. But to do it on her own and get paid, that takes 8 or 10 other aspects of the self that she wasn't operating from.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's confidence. It's also like the mantra that was going through her head was, I'm not good enough. But
Okay.
that wasn't just about art. That was about everything. And now she's, working for pay in her field. And she told me recently, she says, I'm so happy because my grandchildren to be, I'm going to be able to talk to them about being an artist. And she never thought she would ever be able to say that. It just felt like way outside of where she was comfortable. So those are the kind of things that it's more than just going for a job interview. It's all the subtle and not so subtle things that are stopping us. And again, where we destroy what matters most.
Interesting. So she perhaps was having a lack of confidence in herself, or perhaps had some sort of rationale that she couldn't be paid for what she loves to do, or there was some sort of societal perhaps barrier that got in the way of her being able to take this artwork out and show. So your process, it allowed her to frame that in different contexts and enabled her to look at this whole process much differently.
This process this is really subtle, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
This process doesn't frame things differently.
Okay.
This process puts you into that place of who you are naturally. This is the phenomenal contribution. You asked, what's the difference? What's the contribution of Eidetics? What does it do? It isn't about how we think. It's about what emerges from us. And that most people in the 21st century don't even understand what that means because we are so far away from it right now. It's the difference between putting a sticky note on your refrigerator and saying, I'm going to be kinder to my spouse, and actually having them do something that's frustrating or aggravating to you, and a loving response comes anyway, just bubbles up from inside. That's not framing. That's being who you really are.
Okay, so that's perhaps
right?
It's the wrong use of the term framing. I was thinking of putting it into a context.
It's really great that you use that word because that's how everybody thinks about it, mm-hmm. right? So I love that you asked that word. It really it opens an avenue of context and understanding that can deepen what is possible for a person. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I first started Eidetics, I had no idea that I was more than my intellect. I mean, seriously, no idea. I have a good mind. I was smart. I got through school easily. I used my brain to get ahead. And then at one point, I remember looking at my face and I was thinking, I don't really look happy. I look really bad for my age. I was like somewhere in my 30s. I look really bad. I was looking beneath the surface, right? And I was saying, something's wrong here. And I'm successful, but something else is going on. And that's the part that we're dealing with. Does that make sense to you?
No, it does. It does, because I think the example of the mirror is very good, because I think what happens is that we look in the mirror, we may see ourselves, but we all know we see ourselves through different eyes. There may be days when you look good, your hair is good, there may be days when you don't look good. But what I think is happening is the projection of your personality and perhaps your inner ego was coloring that picture. And,
yes.
and erroneously, so you were coming away with a different impression of who you really were. That wasn't how others perceived you, perhaps, but that's how you perceived yourself, which ultimately is, if that's how you perceive yourself, that's what you're going to reflect yourself as well. That's going to come out through you, and that's going to be picked up by others who see you, I think, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And if you're coming only from your head and you rely just on your head, then you're a walking head. Yeah. Like one of my mastermind clients said to me the other day, she said, sometimes I forget I even have feet or legs. She says, I'm so busy and I'm so distracted and I'm so trying to solve these high level problems in her business. And she says, and then I take a moment, I realize there's nobody here, which of course is similar to nobody here.
Right.
So what do we do with that? You get to a certain point in life and in your spiritual development where that, to me, that other parts are beckoning. And we have a choice of kind of coming down out of that and into another space or not. And I think for me, that was one of my forks in the road.
Yeah. You know, as you know, I work with astrology quite a bit, and yes. I am of the opinion that people arrive in the planet, you know, as I always use the term preloaded, as if they have a personality like you would get a computer, but that's derived from the personality traits or the DNA of their mother and father. They come as a hybrid, and they have certain characteristics that they're born with. And I'm wondering if this process is what peels away all the excess garbage and gets back to that original core seed of the individual.
That's a really great way to describe it. I think it's really accurate.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's. You mentioned before that we were going to try some of this. So I'm kind of curious. Should we do that?
Should we? When are we going to take a break? Because I want to kind of time that right.
We'll take a break in about 10 minutes, maybe 8
okay.
minutes. Yeah, we have enough time.
We can start. We'll do the setup and begin it. So a couple foundational principles to help make this very deep and meaningful for you and for your listeners.
Okay.
So number one, this, as I said earlier, even though we're going to be doing an image that has to do with parents, it has nothing to do with history or memory.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We are not just in history or memory. Number two, unlike a visualization, we're not going to control what we see.
Okay.
And I will be reminding everybody when we do this,
mm-hmm.
but I want your mind to hear it now. So we're not going to control, we're not going to decide, I should see this person in this situation. No. Because then that's starting from a point that's controlled by the conscious mind, and it will only give you what you already have. And what's the point of that?
Right.
You already have that stuff. So we're not going to control it. And some people will have one of basically three responses to the experience. People will see really positive images. People will see some positive, some negative, and some people will stay in their heads the entire time, more in memory and reflection. And after we work together, I'll talk to everybody about a way that they can deepen what happened. And I'm not going to necessarily work for a breakthrough here. I particularly want to show you like what your mind can show you about the most important places that you're stuck right now in the areas that are most important to you.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
So
yeah.
To do that, let's start out with, for you, Chris, and everyone listening, to think of something that it would be really great to have a shift in, or a real true look at what's holding you back about anything.
So a look at something that's holding me back, in other words, you're saying, right?
Yes. And you can say it or not say it, but for you and everyone to think of something where you'd like to experience something different in yourself. And if you care to share it, share it. If not, I'll just keep going.
Sure. No, I think I would like to be more of a voice for change. I'd like to be someone who can use this platform I have as a podcast and all the work I do with my art and my astrology as a vehicle for change. I'd like that to be a service that I could use to help people with, as I think I have, but I'm not always successful in that regard.
Could you help me understand, because it'll help me to work later, what ways are you being less of a voice for change now, less of service than you would like to be? So that something concrete, so I understand what you're undertaking.
Probably
here.
Just awareness of what I can offer, awareness to others, and people coming to me for that service or for that purpose. I would like to see more. I don't want this to sound ego-driven, but I'd like to see more people being more interested in what I do and how I can help them back. I think that's part of my charter or my purpose, and I don't always get I don't always see the results of that happening in my life. I know I do a lot of stuff. I've been doing these things for years. Am I someone that people would go to? Is it something that am I viable in this regard?
Okay, so somehow, without going too much into it,
right.
Chris, but somehow being able to get out there more so that people can use your services and then they will change. And there's been something that's not working as well as you would like it to. And okay, well, let's see where we can go. I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm sure it does too. Yeah, that's why I thought it'd be a good topic.
Yeah. All right. So for the listeners, you can do this with your eyes open or closed, not while you're driving. Obviously, you're not going to close your eyes while you're driving. You'll do a lot better with it if you're not driving. You'll go deeper. And I'm going to work with Chris specifically and whatever he says, and I'll give you some suggestions too as we're going. So see your parents in the house that you think of as a home, the house you grew up in, from a time when you're growing up. I'm going to say it again. See your parents in the house that you think of as a home, the house you grew up in, from a time when you're still growing up. Now, don't decide which home. Don't decide where they would be. Don't go back into memory. Just wait and let your mind show you an image and see whether they were divorced or there was a death. It doesn't matter. Just let your mind show you where are they in this specific image and what are they doing. And Chris, for some people, it's going to take a really long time. And for some people, it's going to come instantly. So, Chris, do you already see something? You're nodding there.
Yeah, I do see something. I'm trying to decide which one is more relevant to me, and I
don't do that.
Don't do that.
Okay, so thank you for saying that. Mm-hmm. So, when you look at it, which one draws your eye or your attention more? When you actually are looking at you have a couple images you're seeing, not memories, but images. Mm-hmm. Okay, why don't you tell us what they are? Show us.
Well, the images are probably, trying to figure out where I fit in the family, I think, in some ways.
I'm going to stop you. Mm-hmm. So here's the way that it would be helpful to tell us what you actually see. Where is your mother? Where is your father? And what are they doing? That's what you want to look at. It's not a general thing. It's actually real. But they don't have to be vivid. Don't worry about that part.
Okay.
So you might need another second or two or not.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I see is I see my parents around a table.
Good.
Like a family dinner, perhaps, or just a regular dinner, talking about the day that went on, how successful it was or what was unusual about it.
Wait. I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
Don't put anything into it.
Okay.
Just
the image.
see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I think the image about around the table, dinner table, when I was, say, 7 or 8 years old, something like that.
Okay, now stop. When you see Mom, it's good because you're looking now, and you could see that's really helpful for your listeners because you went from sort of thinking about it to actually more seeing it, which is great. Now, when you look at them around the table, just look at them and tell us what they're actually doing in this particular image.
They're talking about a change.
About a change. And is this do you know what change they're talking about? Can you hear it? Can you tell?
Yeah, they're talking about moving.
Moving. Okay. And this is great. Now, where are you? Because you're looking. Where are you and what are you doing?
I'm sitting at the table and listening very intently.
Yes.
Concerned about what I'm hearing.
Yes. And how old, you said before 7 or 8, but how old do you feel? Just checking in.
I'd say at the time, I think 8.
8. Okay. Now, this is very powerful what you're doing because, one, you're watching and you're letting yourself feel because you're intently listening and you're concerned. Now, you can do this, and everyone listening, look through your young eyes. So you're actually looking through the 8-year-old's eyes and listen to the parents talking and intently and feel the concern and tell me what you're seeing and feeling. And it may be exactly the same, that's fine, but let's see if we can really deepen your connection to what you're seeing and the concern.
What I'm seeing is concern on my mother's face.
Yes.
I'm seeing my father trying to convince her. And I'm seeing myself, I see myself as being nervous.
Yes. Now, in your young mind, when you look at mother's concern or father's trying to convince, do you feel more concerned when you look at one over the other or just both?
I feel more concerned looking at my mother.
Okay, so let's keep looking at her. Now, what is it, as you look at her concern and you feel your concern, tell me even more. What are you seeing, and what are the young you feeling and concerned about? The young you only.
I'm concerned at this point about the unknown, about where we're supposed to be going or where we're planning on going.
Yes. And what does your little body feel like?
My body has that little butterfly feeling in my stomach.
Yes. And
I lost my appetite if I'm sitting around the table.
Okay. Well, you are sitting around the table, right?
Right, exactly.
In the image. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now let's just look at Dad for a minute. So watch him trying to convince your mom and tell us what you're actually seeing between them.
Mm-hmm. I see him trying to convince, he's trying to provide logic. He's also saying some of this is out of my hands. So he's trying to straddle an area of trying to convince her that something is going to be right, but at the same time he's saying much of this is out of my control. So his hands are kind of tied in some way. So he's
Yes.
he's in a position of being compromised, I guess, and yet he has to try.
Wait. Just stay with what you're seeing, because it's an 8-year-old. You're looking through the 8. Okay. So it's out of his control. He's straddling. He's using logic, but at the same time, it's out of his hands.
Right.
So when you see him doing those things those ways, how does the young you feel?
The young me feels disappointed.
Yes.
Disappointed.
Say more. I am looking too, and that's how I feel. Keep going.
I'm disappointed by the turn of events. I'm disappointed by his inability to change the course of events.
Yes. Now slow down, because that's really important. So you're seeing your dad. You're only 8, and in this moment, you're feeling disappointed, and you're seeing his inability to control events.
Right.
Now, as you keep looking at that, now notice through your young eyes, what does your young self feel?
My young self feels
in your body.
Yeah, my body, as I said, feels a sense of tension because it's a tense discussion.
Yes.
So the tension is there.
Yes.
I'm seeing my 2 people I love having this conversation. I kind of leaning more towards what my mother is saying.
Yes.
And my father's desperately trying to convince everybody of something else, and yet I don't feel as if I'm as aligned with him as I am with her.
Yes. Yes. And would you say that you feel frozen in action, like frozen in your body, like you have to stay very still? Because that's how I feel.
Yeah,
as
I feel bound. I feel bound. I can't. My opinion won't matter. I can't change anything at this point. So I feel as if I'm imprisoned in this conversation in some way.
Yes. Okay. Now, do we have to take a break here?
Sure.
Or can we
Let's
keep
take a
going?
break. Let's take a break. It's a good time to do it, because then we can mull it over what we take. But we do. Okay. We'll take a quick break here. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. My guest today is Wendy Yellen. Her website is myspiritualmanifesto.com. One long word. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back to hear what she has to say about what I've revealed. So hang in there. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support. Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is Wendy Yellen, and she is talking to us about her practice, an ancient practice of Eidetic Imagery. And her website is myspiritualmanifesto.com. And it's all one long word. And those of you who listened before were sort of using me as a, well, I don't want to say guinea pig, but at least I'm the guy in the hot seat going through this process to see where we've come. And we're at the next stage where Wendy's questions will lead us to the next chapter or the next phase of this.
Yes, Chris, you've been so willing because I've been just like, let's go this way. No, go a little more left. And you've been so willing. So I appreciate that about you. And I hope that your listeners do too. It's a raw and real experience, and you're being authentic.
Yes, I am.
Which I know is important to you.
It is very much so.
Okay. So when we left off, you were describing your image and you were feeling bound. Now, without putting too fine a point on it, when you think about being a voice for change and getting your service out more and being sought after and found more and doing the things that need to be done for that in a way that works, what is the main feeling you have about doing it in your body? I
feel bound.
Exactly.
I feel bound by events outside of my control.
Exactly.
Or circumstances.
Exactly. So what we just did was we saw, I'm going to talk about it and see if this will help you. So we took one image, which is called the house image, out of thousands of images I could do. But this image pinpoints the place where the stucknesses and the resources are about the situation that you wanted to work with. So you're feeling bound about by external and other circumstances about getting your business out. And what did your consciousness show you? An image where there's a really important decision. Your mother's very concerned. In fact, as I keep looking at it myself, I'm going in co-consciously, I can feel my stomach really tight looking at your mother. And your father is ineffective.
Exactly.
He's also bound by external circumstances. And you, as the 8-year-old, feel disappointed in him. And you feel bound with him.
Exactly.
All right?
That's a very good summary. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is exactly what happens with us. So we have a place that, and one of the things that's happening with all of us is that we identify with our parents. We identify with the worst aspects of them, and every once in a while, some of the really good aspects, unconsciously. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell a quick story about myself. So when I first started to take my business out in a bigger way, I had a father who went bankrupt 3 times and had a huge, wonderful, global almost visionary side, but he couldn't get the train to the station. And my mother could get things done, but with a tight lip and a lot of rigidity and perfectionism. So who wants to do things like that? So I not consciously, but I kept going towards my father's side. But every time I tried to run a business from that part of me that's like my father, being like my father, I would fail miserably because I also couldn't get the train to the station. But I was going to be darned if I was going to be like my mom. So how was I going to be successful, right? So let's just take another moment with your image. Let's just see what happens. So go back and look. An eidetic image is still there. So go look again at it because it's an image that came from inside you. It was already there. Look through your 8-year-old eyes at your parents and tell us when you're seeing it again.
I am. I'm seeing it. Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so you're seeing your father with his hands tied and your mother concerned. Now, see that a cool wind comes down from the heavens, and it's a gift from the gods. Mm-hmm. And the cool wind swirls around 8-year-old Chris. And the 8-year-old you feels that cool wind around you, swirling around you, cooling you. And then watch as out of you number 1 pops you number 2, and number 1 just disappears. What is now watch now. What does number 2 look like, and what does number 2 do?
Well, I'm the number 1. The wind wraps around me, and it leaves an impression on me that I am now different as a result of it afterwards. Correct?
And there is no correct.
Okay.
The only thing I want you to really hear this, Chris, because if you lead from your mind, you really will only get what you already have. Just watch. Let me do it again with you. Okay? Because don't expect something. Don't try to make it happen. Let's just see. So see that the cool wind goes around young 8-year-old Chris, and it's a gift from the gods. And let yourself really see it. You may or may not be able to feel it, but let yourself see it. And then watch. Just watch as it swirls around you. Out of you number 1 pops you number 2. So take a look. What pops out? What does you number 2 look like? And then what does it do?
It's a bit of a rebel.
What do you see?
A bit of a rebellious person saying, I don't like this situation. I don't like the way it's going. I'm not sure I like it. And so I'm perhaps subtly trying to find another way.
Don't interpret. Stay with the image. I'm going to be really strong with you.
Okay, that's fine.
What do you see? What do you see? I don't like it. I'm not sure this is... Just watch and show us what you see. Number 1, see.
Rebellion is the first word I see. Rebellion.
That's the word, but show us what you're seeing.
Pushing back.
Who are you pushing? What are you pushing? Show us.
I'm probably
pushing only visual.
I'm pushing my father.
Father, okay.
Because he's the one who is, I feel like, saying, why can't you change this? So I'm pushing back.
So you're physically pushing him.
Well, no.
No?
Emotionally pushing him. Verbally, emotionally pushing him, saying, I don't like this.
Chris, hold on. What do you see? What is the young you, first of all, what does the one that popped out look like? Does it look the same or different?
It looks different. It's not quite as an easygoing person.
Yes. Is it a male or female?
It's a male.
Okay.
It's not as trusting. It's there's a sense of trust that's been lost, a sense of security that's been lost.
Keep just watching. Just watch. What does number 2 do? Show us visually what you see when you pop out, and you're.
I get up and leave the table. I leave the table.
Where do you go?
Back to my room. To my room.
You go to your room. Now watch and see. What are you doing in your room? Exactly what are you doing?
Closing the door and looking at a book to try to forget what went on.
Okay, now see that the cool wind comes down again, and it swirls around you in the bedroom, reading the book, and you see that cool wind. And out of you number 2 pops number 3. What does number 3 look like? And then what does number 3 do?
Number 3 looks like resignation.
Oh. Okay. Then I'm going to go back with you. I'm going to go back right to the first one, Chris number 1, and you're sitting there and you're bound. There is, you may be familiar, but I'm going to introduce this to everyone. There is a Hindu god named Ganesh. Mm-hmm. Ganesh has the head of an elephant and the body of a boy, and he's the protector of children. and the remover of obstacles. And he has a tiny bit of a pot belly because he loves Indian sweets. So see that Ganesh is there at the dining room table with you. Just see that he's there with you. And tell us what you see when he's there too, with your mother and your father and you. You, number one.
I guess I feel...
Not feel.
Okay.
What do you see?
I see more compassion and support, I think.
From both? From one? From the other?
Oh, from well, he's there, so I feel... that's a tough question. I have to say, what do I see at that point in time?
Yeah, where is he? And
if he's sitting at the table with us, and he maybe...
What's he doing? What's he doing? There's no maybe because you're looking.
Okay.
What do you see?
Him laughing.
Okay, now you're looking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now when you, the young you, sees Ganesh laughing at your dinner table, how do you feel?
Well, I sort of roll with the... I feel giddy as well. I laugh as well.
Yes. Now notice, just keep watching. And you're giddy, you're rolling with it, he's laughing. Now what do you see?
Well, he is trying to comfort.
That's what you're seeing.
Yeah,
and notice how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel to the young you when you see him laughing and trying to comfort young Chris?
In the moment,
yes.
It's a funny experience.
Yes. That's all there is right now is the moment. Okay.
That's what it is. It's a giggly moment. We're giggling.
Okay. Okay. Now, when you look through your 8-year-old eyes, not your adult eyes, Chris, but just when you see the giggly self and you're looking through your eyes, you're seeing Ganesh, he's laughing, he's at the dinner table and laughing, and you're feeling giddy. Just notice what your young body feels like in this exact second as you look.
Well, it's sort of that adolescent kind of, you know, it's the kind of laughter you can't suppress. You know, you're not supposed to laugh, but you're laughing.
Yes.
Because the parents are having a serious discussion, and I shouldn't be laughing if I'm listening.
Yes, yes, yes. So the young you is now you're more of an almost adolescent. Did you grow a little older?
No, I'm still 8.
No, you're still 8. Okay, so you're feeling that not suppressible laughter, which we all know from when we were younger, if nothing else. And I think, but is there a gap between the young you and the way that you're feeling unsuppressible laughter and the way you're feeling right now here, or are you feeling some of what you're feeling in the image?
I think I'm feeling what I'm feeling in the image. I think it's more a moment of irreverence in some way, sort of a a mischievous kind of laughter that we're not supposed to have. And
perfect. Perfect. Don't go into your head. Now, when you look at your parents doing what they're doing and you're feeling mischievous and unsuppressed, what do you see? What do you feel?
Well, I have my image I have of this is that no one else can see Ganesh but me.
Okay. Yes, that's understandable.
And so they are sort of struck by my laughter because they're like, well, why are you laughing? A minute ago you were upset. Now you're laughing.
Yes.
What's going on here?
Yes. And how does it feel to see that they've stopped what they were doing? Because I think that's what they're different a little bit now. Something broke, right? Just notice what
the tension is gone. The tension is gone because I think by me laughing, they're sort of amused at my laughter, especially since I was probably serious beforehand.
Now, when you look at their faces and their bodies. And notice how the 8-year-old feels seeing these parents.
Okay, that's different. That is different. I think my father is kind of amused by it myself. I think he's actually relieved because he doesn't have to do all the defending he was just in the midst of.
Yep.
And my mother is kind of just she had a great sense of humor, so she's just laughing along because I'm laughing. So.
And okay, you're really looking. Now, how does it feel to see your father relieved and your mother laughing now?
It took the tension out of the air.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me talk a little bit about what just happened.
Sure.
So We were when we worked with the cool wind. I did that for Chris, and you could all. I hope you tried it with your images if they were negative ones. That helps us to get to a different aspect of the self that's buried below history, and that we often might not let ourselves connect with, but still there. Now that's called an emanation. It's again one of thousands of images, and your images were going into a more difficult place. You were getting less and less empowered, less and less a sense of self, going further and further away, none of which will help you be out there in the world more. But when Ganesh came, he brought a lightness to you. They couldn't see him, but a lightness to you, and also a ability. And when you were lighter, and your parents saw that, it broke the tension of the spell, and it broke your boundedness. And that you could see, you actually there for a few moments could see different parents. And I think that was a place where I thought that was the most powerful from what I was watching with you, is that for you to get to see those parents. So we talked about identification, and we all have that. So Chris's, let me just speak to everybody. Chris's experience was personal and unique to him, and everybody's images would be different. If you go to the myspiritualmanifesto.com, I'll talk to you more about what could have happened in your image, whether it was negative or positive, and how the mind, which we saw, you were such a great example, Chris, of like wanting to resolve the situation with your mind, whereas your deeper eidetic consciousness had much more to offer you, and I hope you could feel that. Like we talked about that a lot in the beginning, how our conscious minds think we know how to quote unquote fix something. But in fact, we're so much larger than that. And there's so much more resources and positive attributes of us that are sitting there. And we were able to get to more of that. And the so what of what happened here was that Chris, you said you're looking to be, you feel bound by external circumstances, and kind of, it was like that hemmed in feeling like I can't actually be effective here in this work that I feel so passionate about, and I want to get it out more, and I'm not getting it out in the way I'd like to, and then the boundness of the young child, and the boundness by the concern, and the identification with father, which you don't want, but that's what we do, where you feel ineffective and bound by the outside. So you just got a real beautiful look into your own psyche, into places that are deeply held. And that's what this work does. And then we got a little bit of a tiny bit of an opening for you about other aspects of yourself that are sitting there too.
So the idea here would be that this imagery that you brought to light of Ganesh serves as a counterpoint or a balance or counterbalance to the way I may have felt. So the introduction in a tense situation is kind of like comic relief. If you're in a tense situation and something happens that's funny, everybody is more relaxed in the room as a result of that whenever comic relief happens. And so that introduction of that, I think ultimately the idea would be to shift my view of being bound to being liberated, or not. So
I would put it quite differently, and here's why. If you put 100 people in the room, 100 people would see that, again, what was happening with Ganesh differently.
Okay.
Everybody's consciousness brings them what they need. I wasn't trying to lighten the mood. I wasn't trying to do anything. Mm-hmm. I was offering you a way into your psyche, which is incredibly wise, and letting your psyche take you by the hand and take you where you needed to go. So it's not about lightening. It's not about leaving. It's not about feeling more confident. It's not about your parents getting along. You could have blown the roof off the house. You could have smashed your parents. You could have, who knows what. And there are no limits to what this part of the mind would do in order and show you so you can access yourself. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think it's I think what you're saying, it's a turn of perception. It's a turn of a situation from which I felt bound to a situation where I've been able to sort of shift my view of it. I always use the example of looking through a prism. You look through a prism and you may see purple or yellow, and you turn the prism just one simple degree and all those colors change. And I think that analogy of the prism is just sort of how we look at the world in our view of our perspective of the world. We take that prism, we see things this way, and we go like that, and all of a sudden, wow, it's different, and it's yet everything is still the same. We're looking at the same thing, but the perception is different because we've changed our viewpoint of it, and the colors are coming through to reinforce that.
Understood. The perception was different. I think the really important part is that you accessed your own authenticity where you weren't bound. Mm-hmm. Now, the work would be to continue to access that. You weren't you weren't simply lighter. What happened was your parents shifted, and you got to experience, in this case, I would say really importantly, your dad not so bound. And for you to have access to that, or for each person it's going to be different, but to have access to that and to be able to go into that more, what that would do is give you more access to the unbound self yourself. Mm-hmm. Instead of what the founder of Eidetic Imagery, Dr. Akhtarazin, what he used to call it, he said, he used to tell me, you're practicing being like your father. And that was the last thing I wanted.
Uh-huh. But so I think the takeaway from this is, and if I want to summarize this and see if I got it right, I may have gotten it wrong, but it's reframing a situation that was perhaps unpleasant at one time through a new set of lenses.
That is correct as far as it goes. The next layer of it is it has nothing to do with how you think about your parents. It has to do with the unconscious ways that we're either being like them, or that we're held, or that we're in a very familiar situation and we keep doing it no matter how we try. It is not a thinking process, because a reframing really implies how you understand something. Mm-hmm. And that is not enough. You can totally understand that if you eat ice cream every day, you're going to probably gain weight, but that doesn't necessarily stop you from eating ice cream every day. Knowing it doesn't change us, in my opinion. And that's, I think, the incredible gift of Eidetics. If knowing something isn't enough to change it, I know what I had to do with my business back then. I knew the things that I had to do. I couldn't get myself to do them with any consistency or clarity.
So what?
And I know, yeah.
How does this sort of unbind me?
So that's where the work is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's where what you've been a wonderful and such a willing example, really, of letting me take you out of the thinking mind and into another part of your mind over and over and over. You let me go there with you rather than stay in understanding of it. And so the more you spend in that place, that is the work. That's what I work with certain images, with certain people. Each person is unique, to help them with what they want. And it's a consistent working with the mind, not to undermine yourself with what you already know, which is what we all do.
Well, you mentioned earlier the idea of neurons, neural channels in our brain, and the idea of, they're there, and you said that, well, they got cobwebs on them and all this stuff because they've been old and trampled down. I've also understood through the course of time and doing various therapies myself that you can also reburn those connections and in new positive ways.
Yes.
And I think that sort of alludes to what you're talking about here. There's a practice called EMDR, which is a therapy having to do with a repetitive sound that allows you to reburn, and it's used for people who have PTSD, and it's very effective in that regard. And I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it is EMDR. It's something to do with your eyes and your memory. And so you're either, in your case, we're either reburning those new channels, or we're cleaning them up, opening them up, and making them fresh again so that they are active and they don't have all this historical clutter on top of them. It's kind of like plaque in your blood, and your blood, your veins. That's how I think of it.
Yes,
I think
a lot like it. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have to stop and think before you are able to be kind to your partner, then there's some that is not necessary. There is more available within us as human beings than having to stop and think.
So that should, rather than stopping and thinking about how to be nicer to your partner, that should happen automatically.
It can happen automatically. And I used to mentally divorce I've been together with Michael for 40 plus years. And I used to mentally divorce him about 80% of my waking time, many, many, many years ago. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating. I'd rehearse it, I'd practice it. And now what I found, which is so beautiful, I hear him singing out loud. And the thing is, I don't know if he was always singing and I didn't notice it, or if he just started singing out loud. You know, there's a difference that's happened between us I never even focused on it in my eidetic work. It's like a positive side effect of me loosening the constriction of all the ways that my mind was trying to control my life. My conscious mind.
Your conscious mind, yeah. And I think that this is a especially effective therapy today because we're more distracted now than ever. We have a enormous amount of distractions and excuses that we can put in, rationale that we can use, and all these things that we can pile on there to sort of justify the way we feel.
It's a mountain of rationalization. It's just incredible.
Whereas the real core of it is there if you're willing to do the work. And it really is about a shift in perspective, don't you think? That's the best way to summarize it at the end result?
I would say perspective entails how you think about something and how you see something. So I would agree with that in part, but even more so, it's a reconnection with who you already were and who you already are, but got lost. So it's not just, it's an emerging of the authentic self, to use your phrase.
Okay. But you know, as we go through life and we evolve, we're going to be stimulated by different stimuli and different people and different circumstances. Those all build up our personalities, our memory chain, and we learn through trial and error and experience. And we can't discount that either. So to go back in time to this point, we can't rewrite all the history that's already happened. So, but does this allow us to review or reframe? I know that word may be awkward, but does it allow us to put this in a different context because we're looking at it through different eyes?
I'm so glad you asked. Remember what I said in the beginning, that it's not about history and it's not about memory? We were looking at your parents, but what we were really looking at and working with is you. Mm-hmm. Not your history, not your memory. We're working with the way you're operating now, and it came through, not just you, that's what this work does. It came through really clearly with the feeling of bound. Mm-hmm. So I see these things in my images, but they're not about my memory. They're actually about the way things are going on inside me that are holding me back. And that is really important to hear.
Because the initial feeling of boundedness that I may have experienced when I was 8 years old is translated through to my current life and is resurfaced or is part of my personality baggage, and therefore a hindrance to me.
Mm-hmm. And we all have that in multiple ways. You know, not to put a spotlight on something that's going on with you. I want you to really, your listeners to really hear that you've been visible and vulnerable in service of them, and that this is what we do. And it's not about, I didn't ask you what was your family life like. I didn't ask you about memories. We didn't do that. We went somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And we went to places in you that have the wisdom to bring you what you're actually looking for, which is to be out there more and make a bigger difference.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I've got, there's a lot that has happened. I've got to chew on this for a while and digest it. to fully understand it, but I do. I see the logic and I see the process, and I can see how it can actually work. I think it requires practice. Correct? I mean, this is something you
Absolutely, because your conscious mind will interfere. Your conscious mind will continually say, well, that's not what it was like, or, but this was what it was like, or, but I already understand that. The mind is just going to talk, 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 talk. And we already know those things, and they're not helping us. So, yeah, I mean, that's what the people I work with look really good on the outside for the most part. You know, they're usually in a relationship. They have usually a satisfying job. They're fairly together from the outside, but they want more from the inside. And that's how you do it.
Yeah, it's a revisitation of an older period of time. It is. I mean, it is. I can see how it is a branch of a therapy of sorts, because you are reevaluating, doing a deeper dive on an older period of time, reviving it and trying to position it in a way that's more positive to your current life, and see the connection between that singular word of being bound then and how it relates to being bound now. That's something that can be shed, like a skin of a snake or whatever. You can sort of outgrow it.
We started unbinding you in the image. Now, yeah, that was just a snippet, but we went beyond. We weren't going back to history again. Mm-hmm. We were looking at your consciousness.
Mm-hmm. And my impressions, but some of it is based on memory about how I felt at the time. We had to draw on that.
Yeah, but the thing is, if all you do is think about and look at memories, all you're going to do is be in a memory. There's much more to you than your memories.
Of course, yeah. Well, interesting stuff, I have to say.
Thanks for letting me push you so hard. Not everybody would let me do that.
No, but I wanted to be authentic and genuine, and the only way to understand that is to actually do it. You can't sidestep these things.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And this is Eidetics. It's Eidentics. Eidetics.
Eidetics. Eidetics.
Eidetics. Okay. Interesting. And well, we've run out of time here, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but I kind of want to keep talking, but we'll have to get you back on and maybe do another session. But my guest today has been Wendy Yellen. She's a clinical social worker by trade, but her process now is working through this eidetic imagery, which brings a sort of a different way of looking or coping with where you are in your life now that may be rooted in perhaps events from your past. Is that correct to say?
I'm sorry, I'm stuck on something. I'm actually a master's of social work. I don't operate anymore as a clinical social worker. It's not right for me to put that out there, so I just have to correct you on that.
That's part of your history. That's part of your history. But it
MSW.
It does allow us to. I mean, this tool that you have allows us to reconsider those stumbling blocks which are holding us back in a new sense of, I want to say the word perception and framework. I know you may not like that, but that's how I sort of feel. I sort of feel like I'm looking at this situation through different eyes now as a result of that.
That's certainly part of it. You can. It's a chance. It's an opportunity. Well, we've said it so many times. So yeah.
Wow. Well, that is fascinating, Wendy. I hope people get something out of this. I would encourage them to try it themselves. I think that they should contact you. Wendy Yellen's website is myspiritualmanifesto.com. It's one long string of words, myspiritualmanifesto.com. And this is what a typical session is like with someone such as yourself. When you do this, you have this sort of process you go through?
When somebody comes to work with me, I first start with a consciousness mapping where we do 30 different images and they tell me what it is they want right now. Mm-hmm. And I put together what is going on in their consciousness with what they want, a little bit like we did a snippet of today. Right. And then I come up with some core images for them, for the things that are going on with them. And then we work deeply with the unique core images and the way their mind interferes.
Mm-hmm. So how would I use this going forward? This would be a insight into what I see as being bound now as a way to help unravel that.
So the way to actually move through anything that's stopping you is to do the work. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the given, right? It took me Okay, so I have many different certifications and family therapy fellowships and all kinds of ways that I was trained. This particular training to get my certification in Eidetics took 3 years. So to work with our own mind in a way that's not the way we normally do, we have to. You can't just do it yourself because the mind will just keep doing what it already does. Right.
You've got to change the pattern of thinking and change that, and that requires that's the hard work, like you mentioned.
It's consistent, but it's also I'm looking for change in people. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. Yeah. So that's what, of course, they want too. Yeah, real change, right?
That's right. We all want that. We all want to change something for the better in our lives. So, yeah. Well, that's great. Very interesting stuff. I have to say, I'd like to research it further, and perhaps I will. I do appreciate you coming on today. I'm glad I was a good client for you.
You were.
And hopefully, people will get something out of that. I'm fine with that. And I appreciate you very much coming on, and I'm going to pursue this further. I think I'm going to look into it much further and see what I can get from it, because I think there's some real interesting revelations that are there embedded in it. So
I appreciate you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, Wendy Yellen is her name. My Spiritual Manifesto is her website. I encourage you to look into it. It is it's simple in some regard, but it's very complex in some regard, but it's worth your attention if you want to change your life, I think. So thank you very much.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.